Good morning. This is Sky News Breakfast. Thank you for joining us. Health officials trying to stop new coronavirus variants say there's been a big increase in the number of people coming forward for the vaccine. NHS England is reporting a sharp rise in young adults getting the jab, while vaccine uptake amongst a range of ethnic and religious groups is also rising. But infection rates are still increasing, with official data showing cases in England have gone up by around 3/4 in a week. Shingi Mararike reports.
Almost 40 million people have made the trip to places like this vaccination centre in Twickenham. That number includes many who have overcome fears, doubts and misinformation for their dose of protection against COVID-19.
A couple of them hear some stuff, like things will happen to their body and all that, and I just trust the scientists and just say that I'm happy either way.
I spoke to family members who had it. They said it's all right, they're fine. So I decided to get it myself.
A new survey for NHS England shows growing numbers of people are also overcoming vaccine hesitancy. An increase that includes ethnic minority groups targeted in videos like this one.
We don't want you to die. So please, hear us.
And when your turn comes, take the jab.
The data is encouraging news for GPs like Fazana Hussain, who has spent the year trying to encourage vaccine uptake in a local community ravaged by COVID.
Those are just amazing figures, and you think, I don't mind working after hours. I don't mind working in the evenings when we're seeing results like that, because these are lives saved. There's nothing to describe that feeling.
The analysis, produced by ORB International and the Vaccine Confidence Project, has found 63% of people aged 45 and under surveyed would definitely get the jab, while a further 21% said they were likely to accept it. This includes an 18% increase in under 45s from ethnic minority communities. It's not all good news though. The Indian variant is taking hold in areas where vaccine take-up is lower, including Oldham, where less than half of the adult population have had their second dose. Working with the section of the population who will be the last to receive immunity has left this teacher from the area worried.
I think there's an increase in anxiety for everyone now as we recognise the fact that, yes, whilst we have got an increase in vaccines across the country, young people are catching COVID still and are passing COVID on. And while schools and local authorities and parents are doing everything they can to support the management of this, it undoubtedly gives us more challenges in the school day.
Even if people are more eager than ever to get protected, in many ways, it still feels like we've got a long way to go until we can leave this pandemic behind. Shingi Mararike, Sky News.
Well, let's get the latest now on the coronavirus data for the UK. There have been 6,238 new coronavirus cases, the highest total for more than 2 months. There were 11 deaths reported, which means the total number of people who've died within 28 days of a positive test now stands at 127,823. Meanwhile, another 191,266 people have received their first vaccination and 377,641 have received their second. That means that 39.94 million people in the UK have now received a first dose of a coronavirus vaccine. Well, thousands of pubs could be lost forever. That's the warning from hospitality leaders this morning as the call on the government to end the lockdown by June the 21st. Reports suggest that the final stage of England's roadmap to ease restrictions could be delayed. Well, as you can see, Harriet Hadfield joins me now from our newsroom. Harriet, worrying news for pubs for sure.
Yes, it is worrying, isn't it? And this is figures that have been released looking at that week after May the 17th. So, of course, that was when people were allowed to be inside pubs. And they found that when they compare that exact week with the same one in 2019, they only took about 80% of what happened 2 years ago. So that shows a huge loss. And there's also a lot of concern that people were really keen to get back into pubs on May 17th, but that excitement might wane, and so those profits might be down even more. So they're really urging the government, please don't put this great Freedom Day back any longer, because they might not be able to sustain it at all.
And various reports around this morning, Harriet, that June the 21st might be pushed by at least 2 weeks.
Yes, so lots of different reports in different newspapers, but one thing that a few of them are reporting is this idea that the government is considering a 2-week delay to this great easing that we're expecting in July. So that is something that they are apparently looking at. You might say, well, 2 weeks, what's the point of that? But apparently it is all about the vaccines and giving the 40-year-olds, under 40-year-olds, a chance to have their second jab. So that may take it into July, I should have said. For the pubs, though, 2 weeks is a long time. And for the hospitality sector in general, it's the fifth biggest sector in the UK for business, and they are saying, really, we need to be opening up. We really can't take this much longer.
Harriet, thank you. Let's return now to our top story, the rising number of people overcoming vaccine hesitancy and coming forward for their COVID-19 injection. NHS England says there's been an increase in the number of young adults, as well as ethnic and religious groups willing to get the jab. Joining me now is Dr. Anil Mehta, a GP at the Fulwell Cross Medical Centre in North London. Good morning to you. Tell us what you've been seeing in terms of people prepared to actually take the vaccination now.
Good morning, Gillian. Thank you very much for giving me the time. It's been an amazing effort so far. I think what we're seeing now is as we go down the groups, we are seeing younger people respond to the invitations that they've been given by their practices, by their pharmacists, and the mass vaccination centres. So I think it's very, very encouraging that we've had a good uptake from the younger age groups, and I think we've got a bit of a way to go yet. So let's keep going.
Well, what are you putting the increase in people being willing to take the vaccination down to? Is it purely the campaigns, or is it, as time has gone on, people have naturally come to the realisation that this is the best way to protect themselves and others?
I think, Gillian, it's a mixture of both, really. I think the consistent message that actually the vaccines are working. We see the graphs that your reports show us every night, that actually the uptake increases because people start to have the confidence that vaccination really is the way forward. I think persuasion, convincing conversations with pharmacists, doctors, healthcare workers, I think that all has an effect on people's understanding. And sometimes it's just a bit of time that people need to believe the science, and that's it, really. We need more conversations. We need more campaigns.
And from what we're seeing, according to NHS England, a lot of younger people being persuaded.
Absolutely. I think we've been vaccinating at our practice in Redbridge in North East London for many, many months. I think we've seen a change in attitude. We've seen younger people respond to their invitations, respond to the messages that we send out consistently. We remind them that this is the only way forward. This is the way that we unlock ourselves, and that June 21st deadline becomes a reality if we keep sending the same messages out, Gillian. That's very, very important. Can't stress it enough.
What have been the reservations in your experience in the past? What really has been holding people back up until now?
So I think up until now, there's been a hesitancy because this is a new vaccine. This is a new problem that the world faced. I mean, I think there's naturally apprehension in people about new medications, new treatments. So I understand that completely. But I think that as the evidence builds, as we get to know more and more about vaccination, it changes people's minds. And I think it's a matter of time. We social media, unfortunately, has scare stories, etc. But often when you talk to the right people in the medical world, it makes a difference.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of misconceptions flying around out there. One that I've heard is that many adults are saying that they're willing to take what they consider to be a risk and sort of bank on the vaccine, but not so keen for the younger members of their family. You know, there might be issues, some have said, with fertility, with younger women. Are you able to dispel that particular myth?
I think the evidence suggests that actually there is no issues with fertility, with anything more serious than an achy arm, a headache, a temperature, or a fever post-vaccination. So I don't see, we don't have any evidence of any long-term effects of the vaccination at the moment. Now, I think with any medicine, it's a challenge, isn't it? Because we try and convince people, it's like anything. If we prescribe blood pressure medication or we prescribe medication for diabetes, we're on the path of convincing people that actually this is the right treatment for your condition. So I think we've got to dispel the myths. We've got to make sure that people understand and put the evidence in front of them to say, actually, now you can make an informed decision about what the best course of action for you is. And I think it's a very individual decision at times.
I think, though, that when you say that there aren't any, there's no evidence to prove that they're long-term side effects at the moment, it's the at the moment that worries people.
I don't disagree, Gillian. I think the medical world has proven over the years, over decades, that actually medical treatment is often not without issues. However, we've seen the evidence that if you get vaccinated with double dose of the current vaccines that we have prevented a lot of ill effects. We have prevented a lot of people hitting those hospital beds. We've prevented deaths, and we see the figures come down dramatically over the past few weeks and months.
So your message to those still perhaps sitting on the fence would be?
I'd urge you to take up the invitation, respond to the messages that your practices, that your pharmacists offer you. We've had a massive campaign from all parts of our healthcare system. Look at our number of pharmacists that are offering the vaccine now, our GP practices, the hospital hubs, the mass vaccination centres. I think it's a concerted effort from all parts of our healthcare system. Please take up the offer of the invitation, respond. If you have doubts, talk to your practice teams, nurses and doctors, and dispel the myths that actually there's anything more untoward than an achy arm, a headache, a temperature, or feeling a bit groggy for a couple of days.
Dr. Anil Mehta, thank you very much for speaking to us this morning, sharing your expertise with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Gillian. Thank you.
Now, airlines are putting on extra flights and sending larger planes as British holidaymakers try to get home from Portugal. They want to return after a change in quarantine restrictions, which will come into force in the early hours of Tuesday morning from about 4 a.m. Let's speak now to ABTA spokesperson Emma Brennan. Good morning to you. Tell us, first of all, what the situation is regarding people who might have holidays booked that are on the amber list. What sort of rights do they have regarding those holidays and perhaps cancellations and refunds?
You can still travel to destinations that are on the amber list. I think what would prevent you from travelling to some of those destinations would be if the Foreign Office itself advised against all but essential travel. In those situations, if you've got a package holiday booked, then you would be entitled to a refund or to be offered an alternative holiday or to rebook for a later date. But if the Foreign Office isn't advising against travel, then you aren't automatically entitled to a refund. However, lots of travel companies are being flexible. There's more flexibility around holiday booking conditions than there's ever been before. So you should check with your travel company, because even if they can't offer you a refund, they may be able to rebook and provide an alternative holiday, perhaps for later in the year or for next year instead.
So you don't have an absolute right to a refund. It's very much up to the travel agent as to whether they provide you with that.
Yeah, there isn't any right under any of the regulations that are going from a green list country to an amber list country that you would be entitled to a refund unless the Foreign Office advises against all but essential travel. So for the likes of Portugal, it isn't doing that at the moment. A lot of people will be able to travel to the places like Portugal and places on the amber list and be able to quarantine on return. So we expect that some people will still go ahead with their holidays as planned, but we know that that will be a challenge. The quarantine requirements will be difficult for some people. And if that applies to you, then do speak to your travel company to find out what your options are. But I would also say, if you're not travelling until after the end of June, that to just sit tight and wait and see, which I know sounds easier than actually, in practice, it can feel a bit uncomfortable not knowing what's happening. But the reason I say that is the government does have another review planned at the end of June, and that will be looking at two things. One, the countries on the traffic light list, so the countries that fall into the green and the amber and the red list. And hope has always been that as we get closer to summer, more countries will move onto that green list, which is the easier way to travel. And the second review that it's doing is actually looking at the requirements to travel. And the travel industry has said for a very long time, when you've got people who've been vaccinated, do they really need to be able to have to go through the testing requirements and other requirements that are in place at the moment? So these are the types of things that we're encouraging the government to look at. And so at the end of June, things may change in time for holidays in July, August and September onwards.
Yeah, providing a bit of hope there, although it is still quite precarious, because the watch list for countries on the green list that the government promised to warn travel agents and those in the industry before making any decision. They didn't adhere to this time round with Portugal. So there could still be very last-minute decisions, i.e. you might travel to a country that's on the green list, and as we see with Portugal, whilst you're out there, that the status changes.
I think certainly there still is going to be a degree of some uncertainty, even if we do get those changes at the end of June, which is why it's really important when you're planning and booking your holidays that you're very clear at what the terms and conditions are. You know, what are your rights if something does change, and what situation will you be left in? And travel companies really are trying to do their best to be as transparent and as clear as possible and guide people through this process, not just booking, but I know they've been going above and beyond over the last few weeks to make sure that people know everything they need to know. They're sorted when it comes to meeting the requirements to travel at the moment. We want people to be able to get away on holiday. We know they've been desperate to get away, not just on holiday, but also to visit family and friends. So the industry is trying to support people as much as possible.
Emma, are you hoping to get away? Have you got anything booked?
Yeah, so I've got a trip that's booked in France for July, and so fingers crossed that we'll still be able to get out there. And I've also been looking at some more trips later on in the year as well. So hoping to get my first family holiday with my little boy on overseas.
Oh, good luck. Hope you make it out there. Thanks very much for speaking to us this morning.
Thank you.
Also making the news this morning, the world's leading economies appear to be on the brink of a deal to tax tech firms like Amazon, Apple, Google and Facebook. Finance ministers of the G7 nations are meeting in London to stop businesses moving profits to countries with lower tax rates. France has said it will allow British travellers who've had both doses of a COVID vaccine to enter the country from Wednesday. Travellers will still need to quarantine for 10 days on their return home, with France currently on the amber travel list. Vladimir Putin has accused the US of trying to withhold Russia's development with sanctions against the Kremlin. At the same time, the Russian president said there were no disagreements with the US ahead of a summit with President Biden. He also denied Russia had any role in the forced landing of a Ryanair flight and the detention of journalist Roman Protasevich in Belarus.
It's better not to interfere in Belarus affairs. It's better to give people time to sort it out without a rush. All in all, even if they say that some regimes suppress something, all in all, changes in any society will happen according to objective circumstances related to the development of the society.
Around 500 people on the island of Sotra on Norway's west coast have been allowed to return home after a major fire. The blaze is said to have been contained, but officials have warned it could take days to completely extinguish it. Events begin in Coventry today to mark the beginning of its year as the UK's City of Culture. The Coventry Moves event is being streamed online for people at home due to coronavirus restrictions. And one very lucky person in Britain is a lot richer this morning. A single UK ticket holder won the Euro Millions jackpot of £111 million last night after matching 7 numbers in the draw. Unsurprisingly, organisers last night suggested players in Britain might want to check their tickets. Well, it's not me, and it's not Jo, because she's here to do the weather. You would tell us, wouldn't you?
I didn't check.
And you wouldn't be here.
That was the first I knew of it, and I was thinking, I wonder, take a look. I think you've got to buy a ticket first, to be honest. Anyway, in terms of the weather, it's a bit of a lottery over the next few days. We've got a bit of a mixed bag to pick from, but temperatures stay on the warm side. It's not looking too bad. So let's look at today's detail.
Look forward to brighter skies. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Hello there, good morning to you. Well, we know the sun is shining on one person in the UK today, we just don't know who it is. For the rest of us, we're looking really to inland areas out towards the east. We've still got a lot of gloom from where we had that rain over southeastern parts yesterday. And out towards the west, there's a weak frontal system which has managed to creep its way in across parts of Ireland, western parts of Scotland, and it'll give some showery outbreaks there. So really, it is these central areas that see the best of the weather, certainly to start the day. So temperatures up to around 24, 25 degrees Celsius. That's 75 degrees Fahrenheit. Later on, though, we start to see this cloud and rain making its way into parts of Devon, Cornwall, parts of Wales. It's heading towards the Midlands and up towards the northeast. It'll probably skip North Wales and parts of northern England. And as we go into this evening and overnight, we'll find that parts of Ireland and Scotland actually see the better weather. And that's going to continue into Sunday as well. So fairly mild overnight for parts of England and Wales. A little bit cooler over parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. But that's where you'll find the sunshine tomorrow, rather gloomy with outbreaks of rain elsewhere.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
After the killing of George Floyd by a police officer in the United States, the Chief Constable of the West Midlands pledged to recruit 1,000 new police officers from ethnic minority backgrounds. A year on, there's been success with recruitment of South Asian officers, but the force is still struggling to increase the number of black officers. Shaman Freeman-Powell reports from Birmingham.
I'm coming for you. Come on.
This isn't banter between mates. It's a sign of a police force accepting it has issues, engaging with the community it serves, and trying to do more.
That's life, that's good.
A year ago, these officers watched the video showing the final moments of George Floyd's life.
It kind of feels like your candle's being burnt on both ends. So you feel the pain from the black community, and as a black man, seeing someone you could recognise as a friend, cousin, brother, or even yourself. But then you also have the professional disappointment of, I know how it's supposed to be done, and seeing it go so horribly wrong. I mean, both sides of your very person are screaming, almost at odds with each other.
No one understands those dueling loyalties more than the force's most senior female officer.
The uniform represents something to our community.
But Karen Geddes believes George Floyd's death has sparked real change.
But what I've seen in police training is a conversation with staff around how we go into incidents, how we understand historical context. So if one thing George Floyd has had an impact on within policing, it's definitely changing how we train and upskill our staff around cultural competence.
Wait, he didn't do anything! In the last 12 months, high-profile stop and search videos have gone viral, leading to questions about police tactics.
It's an interesting experience being stopped by the police.
My name's Nathaniel James. I'm a stop and search.
Nathaniel has been stopped and searched over 300 times. He now runs a workshop helping young people understand the law and their rights.
There's been other situations here where, like, police officers have put me in handcuffs here and now asked me a question.
If you're black, you're almost 9 times more likely to be stopped and searched by the police.
So how many of you guys have been stopped and searched by the police?
At this workshop, it's clear that negative experiences have detrimental impacts on the relationship between both communities.
There's a lot of distrust. They're paranoid. They don't know their rights. They feel like, some of them feel like they've been extorted in a sense.
One solution could be to recruit more black officers.
About 17% of our recruits now from black and ethnic minority communities. I think that is a good start, but the population's 35% and probably higher. The numbers of black officers applying is awfully poor. So 1% of our officers are black, about 1% of our recruits are. We're not going to change the force. And so we, kind of just coming up to a year into that recruitment process, we're doing a lot of work looking at what more we can do.
But even with a more representative force, there's still the problem of reversing years of mistrust.
Would you ever consider a career in the police force?
Not personally, no.
Why?
I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done in the police force. There's a lot of things that need to be changed. I think there needs to be changed from the top down.
Who me? No. It's just not really my thing, to be honest. Like, it's not really my... Yeah, I mean, no, I wouldn't.
So you could go to my friend.
A community which feels over-policed and under-protected, and a force trying hard to change.
It's a city, isn't it?
No worries at all. You stay safe.
Shaman Freeman-Powell, Sky News, Birmingham.
16 months of lockdown restrictions have radically affected our personal finances. Figures from the Bank of England suggest we've managed to save up nearly £170 billion, which is now sitting in bank accounts. Let's get more on this story from personal finance journalist Anne Ashworth. Morning to you. This might shock you, but I haven't saved up £170 billion. What is the average amount that people have saved during the pandemic?
Well, it depends on their circumstances, but the British have been putting aside almost twice the amount they normally do in, about 10 to 15 billion every month. And it used to be about half that. And the question mark is now, have we really got the savings habit big time permanently, or are we going to go out and spend all of this money?
Well, I mean, the Bank of England has previously said that they would actually like us to go out and spend, when we can, 100%, to boost the economy. Are people likely to do that, or do you think they've got used to having lump sums saved up?
I think some people will be willing to spend on their houses. We're not perhaps going to be go abroad, maybe making their gardens more lovely for a bit of staycationing in the backyard. But there is some sense that people are beginning to pay off credit card and other debts, which is a very wise thing to do. I suspect some people will put the money towards their mortgage, which again would be a wise thing to do. But I think there are, and this is indeed what the Bank of England and the government is hoping, that those pent-up savings will be unleashed, and we will go out and buy some new clothes, go to restaurants, and generally have ourselves a really good time.
Yeah, and so much has changed. People talking now about hybrid ways of working, not being a wholesale return perhaps to the office. So people thinking about creating more space so that they can have offices at home. I mean, that will take considerable funds to refurbish homes.
I think people will be making themselves chic little work units, but one of the most interesting things about working from home is it's made us more interested in our investments. So people have been opening accounts at these investment platforms, these online financial supermarkets, looking up where some savings they had, see what's happening to them, and making new savings. And a lot of those new customers of those financial platforms are younger people who are thinking maybe they need to build financial security for the future, because the pandemic has changed us in how we feel about our money and a great much else in life.
Back with us now to take us through the newspapers this morning, broadcaster Afia Dom and editor of Challenges Northern Ireland, Thomas Copeland. Welcome back to you both. We're going to start with the Telegraph and the fact that we might not be alone, Afia. Slightly scary photo, I think, they've mocked up on this story. I think so anyway. I think it's scary.
Yeah, I agree. It is a bit of a worrying picture. So this is a story in the Telegraph that the US have been doing an investigation into UFOs. There's an intelligence report that's going to be put before the Senate on the 25th of June. And this report has found that although it has no evidence of UFOs, it cannot rule them out completely. So it examined 120 UFO sightings over the last 12 decades and eliminated the possibility that the incidents occurred because of secret black ops US intelligence programs, if you will. And it put those sightings down to probably hypersonic Chinese and Russian aircraft or drones that they have invented. And so there actually is a worry in Washington that perhaps Beijing and Moscow have technological advances that the United States simply don't have, and have managed to create this hypersonic, super fast vehicles, ahead of the United States. But the report said it also couldn't rule out things like the unusual direction in which these aircrafts could move, moving frequently side to side, really rapid acceleration, or going in and out of water. It couldn't explain how those aircraft could do that. So therefore, it cannot rule out that there could be UFOs, but it hasn't found any evidence that there are UFOs. So this is a little less X-Files and more a case of the US being concerned about their national security, and also being concerned that China and Russia have developed hypersonic technology that they don't have their hands on as yet.
Yeah, no proof, but they can't rule it out. I mean, I refer to the photo as being scary. Others might think it's really exciting. Thomas, which camp are you in?
I don't know, probably scary. You think the aliens would just through a global pandemic, they think you give us a couple of months before they invade. Do you know what I mean? We want to get back to the pub for a bit before the next major global crisis occurs.
Let's move on then, shall we, to the FT. You've had a look at this story, the G7 finance minister meeting. What's happening there?
A much more sombre story, I'm afraid. It looks like one of the major results of the G7 taking place currently in Cornwall will be in relation to the taxation of multinational corporations' profits. By the end of the day, we're probably expecting a communique from the major Western democracies, all their finance ministers, to back a global minimum rate of 15% for multinational corporations. In particular, in your mind, think about the big tech companies, things like Google, Facebook, Microsoft. These are the kind of companies that the US under Joe Biden has been quite concerned about, largely due to sort of international tax systems whereby, you are paying tax in your HQ or where your patents are or where your trademarks are, rather than where most of your sales are taking place. So this is a measure designed to alleviate some of those problems. There's a bunch of ins and outs still to be sorted out, but when this communique is published, probably at the end of the day, this is going to be a major development in the way that international taxation works. Two things I'll say quickly in terms of maybe domestically where it's most important. One, does this represent a change in the way the Conservative Party has looked at corporation tax in particular? I'm thinking back to under Cameron, for example, and Osborne. Lowering corporation tax is always something to which they aspired. It was associated in their minds anyway with an increase in jobs and prosperity. Rishi Sunak has already increased the UK tax corporation tax rate, for example, from 19% it's going up to 25%. Or does this actually say that this is about Boris Johnson maybe trying to cozy up a bit to Joe Biden? There's very little to lose if the UK corporation tax rate is rising anyway. The other way of looking at this, I suppose, particularly from the EU perspective, is that the EU is represented here by Pascal O'Donoghue, who's the Irish finance minister. Ireland has had for the last number of years a very low corporation tax rate, about 12.5%, and a great number of big US in particular tax firms have based their headquarters there. And that 12.5% rate has been backed and defended by successive Fine Gael, Fianna Fáil governments over a number of years as bringing jobs, investments and prosperity to Ireland. Its critics say that it's all souffle, there's nothing really underneath it. It's all about these companies not paying much tax and not actually delivering that much in jobs. So actually the major opposition here could come from the EU, in particular countries like Ireland, rather than the Tories, which seem to be quite happy to back Joe Biden on this. But by the end of the day, we'll see where the battle lines are drawn.
Yeah, no, interesting. It could be groundbreaking, as you say. To the Times, Afia, and the headline there, the boast of Boris Johnson and the UK government that half of adults have been vaccinated, fully vaccinated. But the but is that depending on where you live, according to the Times.
A huge caveat there, Gillian, a real but. And so, yes, Boris Johnson has been touting that over half of adults have been vaccinated, but that really does vary depending on where you live. So in Tower Hamlets, for instance, around 23.5% of adults have been vaccinated. That's the worst performing area, Tower Hamlets in London. But in the Isle of Wight, it's 64%, around 67%, have been vaccinated there. So it seems that in big cities such as London, Manchester and Newcastle, they have the lowest rates of adults being vaccinated. Now, some people are saying that people tend to be more transient in big cities. Perhaps they move there or they move more often. They may not be registered with a GP or maybe registered at their old address and perhaps have missed an appointment letter to come and get the vaccination. But of course, we do still have some vaccine hesitancy, and that is amongst some of these areas, especially in London or particularly in London, and they have low uptake uptake of the vaccines, Tower Hamlets being one of them.
Sorry to interject, though. Although that, you know, we've been running today that there's evidence that more people are taking up the vaccine, and that the levels of hesitancy have been quite drastically reduced.
Oh, absolutely. Yes, the levels of hesitancy are going down, but they still have some way to catch up. And it's really important that those areas that have low vaccine uptake can be more encouraged to take up vaccine, because those areas tend to be more affected by COVID-19. Now, this report also says that across the country, 94% of the over 65, the older age group, have had both of their vaccinations, and they actually make up 90% of all deaths. So that's great that that age group are certainly on the button and on the uptake with the vaccinations. But it also shows that the vaccine rollout, there is still some work to do across the country. If you want to get those rates up, if you want to encourage people to come back for their second vaccination, there's talk of bringing down the wait time from 12 weeks to 8 weeks. So it just shows that we need to keep encouraging people to come for their vaccination for their first dose, and of course that all-important second dose as well, so we can get those rates up all across the country.
It is an ongoing campaign. Thomas, tell us what Gordon Brown is warning Boris Johnson about. This is in The Guardian.
This is it features on the front page of The Guardian, and it's an interesting exclusive interview that they featured in the paper today as well. So, I mean, Gordon Brown's post-Downing Street career has looked rather more positive than some of his fellow former prime ministers in recent times. He's releasing a book, 7 Ways to Change the World, it's called. It's all about a passion of his, which is global multilateralism. Just about got that one out. Do you think
out of time, but basically he's saying that his mistakes will catch up with him.